Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Cranston. I'm the project manager responsible for this meeting. I'm in the Licensing and Regulatory Infrastructure branch in the Division of New and Renewed Licenses at the NRC. Carolyn, I just wanted to do a quick sound check to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. On the Holtec side, Andrew, is there anybody that you're waiting for to join?
It looks like we have everyone we need, Greg, so we can get started when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Today's observation virtual pre-application public meeting is to discuss the SMR-160 plus TMI requirements. Members of the public are invited to observe the business portion of the meeting and to make comments on the topic discussed or ask questions of the staff at the end of the session. We may have a closed session at the end of this open meeting to discuss proprietary information related to the TMI requirements. Pre-application engagements like this meeting provide an opportunity for early discussions with a potential applicant to offer licensing guidance and to identify potential licensing issues early in the licensing process. No commitments or regulatory decisions are made during pre-application engagements. The NRC has not received an application for the SMR-160 design and is not evaluating any final design information. In conjunction with logistics, we have quite a few people attending, so I'm not going to go through and have everybody introduce themselves. But during the meeting, if you have a question or a comment or whatever, please raise your hand and I'll recognize you. And then at that time, please provide your name and affiliation. When not speaking, please keep your microphone on mute. One other thing that's going on today that some of you may have heard of is there's a national wireless emergency alert test, which is supposed to happen around 2:20 this afternoon. And apparently it pings everybody's phone. So if something happens and all of a sudden things are going on and you don't know what's happening, that's it. So I just want to make you aware of that. Okay, Carolyn, did you have any introductory remarks?
No, I did not. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, Andrew, do you have any introductory remarks?
Nothing in particular. I'll just note, we always appreciate the staff giving us the time to discuss our design with you and get some good feedback. The one thing that I know Clark will touch on at some point, that most of these requirements, we developed this presentation based on the SMR-160 design. We are in the process of upgrading that design to the SMR-160 plus, and there might be some requirements that do not, or compliance with those requirements might slightly change. However, we think that we're still presenting our anticipated TMI requirements compliance table within the PSAR Chapter 1 that would be reflected in the SMR-160 plus construction permit application within this presentation. So we do believe that this is still reflecting the upgraded design. So I just wanted to address that beforehand, since a lot of the staff may not have been aware of that recent change. So
okay. Carolyn, can you see the slide on your screen?
Yes, I can. Thanks,
okay.
Greg.
Andrew, if you prefer, I can stop sharing and you could share. Who's ever giving the presentation on your side could share and drive. It's up to you, whatever works best.
Yeah, Greg, this is Clark. I think that would make the most sense. Some of these I'm going to try to run through reasonably quickly because, hopefully for a lot of these, they're they're reasonably boring, we intend to conform with the requirement, and we won't have a whole lot to talk about. So I think it makes sense for one of us to drive, and then for those that we think are pretty straightforward, we'll kind of zip through them unless NRC staff have a particular comment.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing then.
All right, very good. Okay, hopefully y'all can see my screen here.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Let's see if I can. All right. So I guess I'll kind of skip some of the introductions. We've got myself and Andrew from the SMR licensing team. We've got a whole bunch of other folks from SMR who I might be calling out as we move through this. Who've got obviously these TMI requirements touch a whole bunch of different parts of the design and operations, and so we'll be if I need some backup, I'll be calling out folks, and we can introduce them at that time. The purpose of this meeting is to talk about the TMI requirements contained in 10 CFR 5034F and to get NRC feedback. The format that most of our slides are in here kind of reflects our planned conformance table in the SAR. We've got the requirement item number on the left, a kind of abridged version of the requirement that I've kind of condensed for brevity. Then essentially our position on conformance, whether we intend to conform, believe that the requirement is not applicable, or are planning to request an exemption, and then the justification on the right. You'll see on some of the slides we've got either a note or a comment or a question that we don't intend to include in the final table, right? That the portions in the information on the main portion of the slide is what we intend to include in the eventual table. These notes and comments and questions are just for our discussion today. And then I won't be going through perfectly in order. I'm going to be, some of the items that we think are just not applicable to us. I've kind of moved down to the end of the presentation. If we end up running out of time and don't get time to address all of those, I kind of see them as slightly lower priority because we view them as not really applicable to our design. As I mentioned, for items where we think we're gonna conform or where they're very evidently not applicable, I intend to move through those pretty quickly. If the NRC has a particular comment on any of those that I zip through, feel free just to raise a hand or shout out, and we can go back to that particular requirement. All right. Any questions on that? Okay, hearing none. Kind of a first question before we dive into the actual requirements. The conformance table, the TMI requirement header requests kind of a fair bit of information and a fair bit of detail. The text of that portion is on the top half of the slide there. In some cases, we're not intending on providing the level of detail that's described there because the vast majority of that detail is going to be provided elsewhere in the PSAR. In almost every case, there's going to be a different PSAR section that has a great deal of detail that addresses the particular TMI requirement. And so for the sake of brevity, our intention is to provide a very brief discussion of whether we conform, how we conform, and whether, et cetera, for not applicable and exemptions, and expect that the detail would be provided elsewhere. For the NRC, does the NRC expect to see a reference to the section where that detail is located in every single case, or are there some cases in which a specific reference to any or the several locations where that information might be residing in the PSAR? I guess, how much of those references do you expect to see in the final document?
This is Greg. Does anybody in the staff have feedback on that question?
Hi, this is Carolyn. I think I can respond to that. So I think as much information as you can provide in the table that references where the additional information can be found would be most helpful for the staff. I think that would make a more efficient review if they knew ahead of time, right? Looking at that table as a guide to where that information could be found.
Yeah, this is Ryan, Rector Systems. I'll just add on to what Carolyn said. I agree. I wouldn't say it's required by any means, but for the sake of efficiency, it may be helpful to provide the pointers so that it's a little bit easier for the staff to find that information and identify where it is. Otherwise, we don't want to get bogged down in writing RAIs of where's this information? Oh, it's over in this portion of the application. And so I think it's just more of a best practice or it's good for efficiency's sake.
Okay, that's about what we expected. So very good. All right, so we'll get into the requirements now. The first one is pretty straightforward. Supposed to perform a plant site-specific PRA. We are developing that, and we're going to be submitting that as part of the OLA. The next one, there are a variety of oh, sorry. Yep, it looks like we've got a question.
Yes, please. This is Marie Pahida with the PRA staff.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at 5034 F1I, it says perform a PRA to seek improvements in design of the core and containment heat removal that are significant and practical. So it's just more than performing the PRA. It's once that the design has been identified to seek if you can improve that, if there's any, cost beneficial safety enhancements that are significant and practical. So it's just more than submitting and doing the PRA.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, and maybe our justification here isn't explicit enough to really talk about that. But when we talk about integrating into the design process, we are specifically intending to mean that we are using some of those findings from the PRA that have led to improvements in our design itself. And so maybe that's just where the misunderstanding is. But we do feel like we've already been taking full advantage of the PRAs that we've developed to kind of have those learnings early in the design process and make those improvements within the design.
Thank you.
And then that's possibly a result of my seeking brevity on some of these. I don't the ones that I have shortened. I don't intend to indicate that we aren't reading the whole requirement or aren't intending to meet the whole requirement. Just aiming for brevity for the sake of this presentation. Okay, so the next one we're talking about aux feedwater systems. So there are a variety of requirements associated with the aux feedwater systems. Our design does not include an aux feedwater system. But we do have a system that serves a similar decay heat removal function. And so our expectation is not to include a great deal of discussion about, or really much of any discussion of the other systems that have similar DHR functions, because the language of this requirement points to the aux feedwater system, which we don't have.
So this is.
Go ahead,
Go ahead, John. No, you go first.
Okay, I was just going to ask about this this topic. This is John Lenning from the staff here, and there are a couple items where I think this similar question might come up, where there's a different system. Not only the name's different, but a lot of the components are different. But then the similar function is served here. And I guess when I look at the requirement, I suspect that there are probably a lot of the things that have been done, like the reliability analysis, design review. You probably have done those things, and so I'm not the legal authority here to say whether compliance, whether this could be actually called a not applicable one, or if it's legitimate for the NRC to expect that you treat this system that does a similar function according to that requirement. But I think it's something to consider whether that might make sense to include some of that. And you know, especially like this one, you've probably already done similar things for that system.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say, John. You know, we're not in a position to say whether or not we view this as NA or we believe it is applicable because there's a system that performs a similar function. I think on a lot of these requirements, you can do a very strict plain language read and say they don't apply, or you could take a different approach and say, well, what's the intent that what's the issue that this regulation is trying to address? And, you know, here's the equivalent of what this system is and the function it performs for our design. And so while we can't say today whether or not we believe this is truly not applicable or you need to demonstrate conformance, I would just say, you know, be prepared to address how the intent is being addressed in your decay heat removal systems. For example, you know, if you're doing a passive system reliability study as part of your Chapter 19, right, that addresses a piece of this TMI item and what's the reliability of the decay heat removal system. And so I think that's the extent of the feedback we can share today.
So Ryan, this is Andrew Brenner. I guess I want to follow up on this in particular, maybe two parts to it. The first, it's hard for us to, and this one might be a little bit more obvious, but a lot of these requirements, it's hard for us to really determine what the intent is if it's not, you know, written down within the requirement. You know, we've gone through some of the new regs that talk about these, some of the Federal Register notices, and it's not necessarily straightforward all the time what the true intent is. And so we do kind of look at what the requirement states to try and determine whether or not we are conforming with it. And I guess the second part of my comment back to you would be like, we're trying to understand how this has been applied to previous designs. And it does seem like previous designs have taken this approach to state that, you know, there are requirements that are not applicable, that even though the intent could be interpreted as applicable. So I guess I'm trying to struggle with making sure that we're providing you the right information, but also making sure that we're not providing excess information that's not necessary to meet a requirement that truly might not be applicable just based on how the requirement is written. And I think there are some examples of this beyond the TMI requirements. I think there are some design-specific requirements, if I remember right, in the Atlas regulations that I think we previously talked about, and we've agreed that those requirements are not applicable to the SMR design, given that it's not, you know, I think they're combustion engineering or specific requirements in that specific regulation. So I guess I'm just trying to, you know, again, make sure that we're providing you everything that you guys actually need to go and review the SAR, but two, not providing so much information that is excess and you know, potentially confusing the reviews as well.
Yeah, I understand. I think those are all fair comments.
Okay. Yeah, and as we mentioned, it looks like that this one, the intent seems reasonably straightforward. We can, you know, kind of point out some of the ones a little later on where we've done a kind of a deeper dive and haven't been able to divine what that intent is. So
before you move on, I'm sorry, there's a question from the staff, Richard Staddle.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Rich Staddle. So the thing about this is in your justification. So if you respond to this by providing information to demonstrate conformance, okay, that's okay. But if you're going to make a justification for not applicable for conformance, this isn't going to fly, right? Just saying you don't have a system that's called aux feed water, because obviously you've made a determination that this is a decay heat removal function, right? So a lot of this, I mean, we can debate whether it's actually not applicable or there's some other way of justifying conformance. Or we could make a non-applicable argument, but that justification would definitely have to go into what the basis for the requirement is. And I understand in some cases, like this one, yeah, it's decay heat removal, but you might have another case where there's a requirement for like a recirc pump, and you don't use recirc pumps, so that would be a different kind of justification. But just saying you don't have a system called AFWS, that's really that would not be considered an adequate justification.
And I just wanted to add, this is John Lanning again, and so I think we know you guys abbreviated some of your information here on these slides, but yeah, just to give an example, like some of the B&W or other plants might call it emergency feed water, for instance, and they still responded to this. So anyway, I just wanted to add.
Thank you.
So I guess maybe one additional follow-up. I think, again, I understand what you're saying, Rich, and maybe we can be more explicit when there are not applicable requirements. And also, we think that the intent doesn't apply. And we try and base some of this off of what we've looked at from previous applications and how they write their justifications. There are definitely examples where they do go into talking about that the intent doesn't apply. I think there are examples where the justification is as simple as you kind of see on the screen now. So I understand you might be looking for more from us. I want to reiterate my first comment, though, in that a lot of the time, some of these requirements, the intent is a little bit hard to interpret and track down. And so if that is the expectation that we have more than just we don't the requirement does not apply because we don't have a specific system, and we also don't meet the intent. I think we're going to potentially struggle a little bit on some of these because there is no seemingly easy to find written down intent of all the requirements.
Or alternatively, we'll spend a lot of the time on the phone with you guys trying to dig into the history and understand where those are coming from. I think we also understand, we're not trying to evade requirements merely by, sticking a fresh coat of paint on the same system, or, just switching some of the letters around. In this case, we truly don't have a system that is, providing auxiliary feed water. And so we think that it's perhaps this one isn't the most straightforward in terms of us just trying to dodge something. That's certainly not our intent. Sorry, another hand here.
Yeah, this is Joe Ashcraft. And this could be apples and oranges, but I know when we were going through the new scale review, they went through a similar kind of process, and I think we had the same kind of discussion for this very thing. I think their claim was they didn't have an auxiliary feed water system, but I guess all I'm saying is you may want to look to their discussions. That it may help you come up with an answer to satisfy.
Yeah, Joe, if you don't mind, I pulled up New Scale's TMI requirements compliance table just to, understand what they were doing as we were talking here, and their comments for compliance with this requirement is this rule requires an evaluation of proposed PWR auxiliary feed water systems. New Scale plan does not have an auxiliary feed water system like a typical LWR. Neither the literal language nor the intent of this rule applies to New Scale design. And that's all the discussion. And we've gone through the safety evaluation report too to understand if there were some additional considerations when this was evaluated. And we couldn't at least glean anything. And maybe that's the reason for some of our brevity here, but it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of punch behind these justifications similar to what we're providing you today. But it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of rationale for why the intent doesn't apply. And it's just something that we're struggling with. That's what we're kind of looking for some feedback on. If you have some good pointers for us to understand what the actual intent is for all these requirements, because again, some of them aren't as straightforward. We can do a little bit better job providing that in the justification for our table. It's just not necessarily clear to us what the intent is for all the requirements.
Yeah, understood. I was just trying to be helpful, so sorry about
Yeah,
that.
I appreciate it. I guess my only point is I don't think necessarily pointing to the new scale application as a higher standard than what we're providing is really too much different than what we've provided here today so far, at least for this specific requirement.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. So seeing no other hands, I think we'll move on from this topic. Maybe we'll revisit it as we get to some of the other ones with where the intent is slightly less clear. Okay, so this next one is about RCP seal damage. We are still working on finalizing our RCP design, and so we are not sure exactly whether we are going to choose a sealless design or one that includes a seal. I guess our question for you is, in the event that a sealless design is selected, would we be considering this not applicable or pursue an exemption?
I'm not sure. This is John Lenning. I'm not sure who on the staff might be the best person to speak to that. And I think, like Ryan said, maybe we don't want to give too definitive feedback. But I mean, one way of looking at that is if there's no seal, I mean, there's no possibility of damage. And it's almost, to me, as if you could argue that you might be able to have evaluated and found that because you don't have the seal, there's no possibility of damage. I don't know the final, what that position might look like from the staff, but I don't know that. I don't know if you've considered something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying, John, there is that perhaps depending on how we would approach that, we could, choose conforming because of not having a seal and we've done that evaluation, or we can say potentially not applicable because there is no possibility for seal damage. I guess really all you're saying is there's a couple different ways we can approach this that potentially would be acceptable to the staff.
And it sounds like you guys have done some homework, and I know there have been other designs out there with without seals or with canned type motors, so they might have blazed that trail a bit already too.
Okay, very good. All right, so this is about stuck open power operated relief valves. So in this case, we do not include power operated relief valves in the reactor coolant system. We do have safety valves for overpressure protection, and we do have automatic depressurization valves, and which are power operated but are intended to remain open after an initial operation. They're not intended to close afterwards. We weren't intending to provide a great deal of discussion of those valves in this portion, but we will be analyzing unintended actuation of the ADS. So we will be, elsewhere in the PSAR kind of addressing the possibility of unintended actuation of the depressurization system.
Just a question on that one, John Lenning, again from the staff. Have you looked at the idea of a stuck open safety valve as a part of this too? I think in the original designs here that this requirement was going toward the PORVs might have been limiting to safety valve stuck open. And is that something you've thought through or have looked at precedent on?
I guess I'll have to kick that question to Clay. Clay, do you know if that's one that we've evaluated?
So we've evaluated, that is the initiating event. Let's just, for simplification purposes, let's say that safety relief valve is a 3-inch diameter. So we've analyzed the 3-inch diameter break of that line, and we've analyzed, down to, 3/8 of an inch break of that line as the initiating event. Or are you saying that?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, or are you asking, are we analyzing a stuck open safety relief valve following a different type of initiating event, maybe like a turbine trip coincident with loss of offsite power, something like that, where you'd lift it and then it doesn't reseat.
No, I think this one was, this requirement was not necessarily tied to some other operational event. I think it was just sort of somewhat standing alone. And it sounds like you may have done that, some analysis that might be argued to encompass that event. And so, I mean, that might be another way to go about answering this particular item. And again, I know we've had a long discussion about intent and so forth, but that's something that could be helpful to help address this one potentially.
Okay.
Yeah, John,
Understood.
I'll just add two briefly. Again, this is another example of previous applications have simply just stated that they do not include power operator relief valves, and therefore this requirement is not applicable to their design. There's not even any discussion on intent specifically for the conformance statement of that in the new scale table. But understand if the staff would like additional discussion, we can potentially provide it. We're just trying to make sure we're striking the right level of detail so as not to, provide so much discussion that it opens us up to additional questions.
This is Hassan Salman. I remember there was a new reg 0578 in the TMI requirements, which required to check if the valves, water flow or steam flow through these valves. Are they designed for steam flow, right? I guess I'm not sure. But there was a possibility of water flow through these valves in that new reg. And that's what they were required to be qualified for.
Just to Clay Weiler from Holtec, so our pressurizer safety relief valves and the size of our pressurizer, the size of the pressurizer is sized such that this pressurizer safety relief valves will only pass single phase steam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no event in which there is a possibility of water flow through these valves.
That is correct for our design, yes.
Okay. Did you look at that new reg 0578? That was a TMI requirement.
No.
Yeah, I can't recall specifically if I have. I may have. I went through a whole bunch of old TMI related new regs. That may be one of them that I went through, but I'm not sure. It seems that not all of the TMI related new regs are available on the NRC website, so has in some cases been a little bit challenging to find them all.
Yeah, that new reg addressed this kind of issue for both BWRs and PWRs. That if there's a high pressure water flowing through these PSVs, then they should be qualified for. But I guess this is both. This applies to both PWRs and BWRs. And the licensees had to do a lot of testing of these valves, and they had to verify that high pressure water is not possible to flow through these valves. That kind of issue. So please check new reg 0578.
Okay, very well, will do.
Thank you.
There's a hand up, Shil?
Yeah, this is Shil Savda from the NRC. Again, I don't know where you will land up on this in the discussion on intent and conformance, etc. What I wanted to point out as feedback is the actual words in the regulation. They say perform an analysis of the probability of the small break lockup. And then it goes on to say, if it is a significant contributor, then do something or the other. It just doesn't go into do an analysis. So just you may want to read the regulations as to what they are asking you to do.
Yep, understood. We don't intend the shortened requirements here to to mean that we haven't read the full requirement. We're just showing a shorter version here for brevity's sake.
Right. Where I'm coming from is that, I mean, it's not a direction to directly doing an analysis. It's an analysis if the probability is a significant contributor. So it's not like you have to do something right away.
Right. Okay. Understood.
So Shil, maybe I should ask you the follow-up question. Would you expect us to perform that probability analysis for our pressurizer relief valves, even though they are not power operated?
I think that goes back to kind of the discussion about intent or not, and I don't think I have anything more to add besides what John and Ryan said. I am also not a legal expert. And also I think Joe mentioned precedent with other designs. I don't have much to add over there. I was just pointing out, depending on where you land, it's not that you just need to do an analysis right away.
Okay, understood. All right. This next one is about, this is a requirement that was listed as applicable to BWRs only, talking about automatic depressurization system. Our design includes an ADS system similar to that used by BWRs. We intend to list this as not applicable. Again, we're asking about whether it should be listed as conforms, given that we have, we have a similar system, and we either have or intend to perform this risk assessment study. So I guess it sounds like from the conversation we've had so far that the NRC staff are not going to comment on whether we should list this as not applicable or conforms.
Well, this is Ryan. I guess I know you looked at multiple new reactor applications for precedent, and I think there's been a lot of mentioning of NuScale, but I mean, I would go back and look at what AP 1000 put here as well, because I don't believe they tried to argue that it wasn't applicable to them. I think they provide some explanation and pointers to, yes, we have an ADS, and then points to, where the information on that system is provided.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, Ryan. I guess, and I'm not trying to, say we're trying to push you to allow us to do non-applicable, because it seems like the easier solution here. And I guess we're just trying to understand if non-applicable is an option for us. We might be interested in taking that because it, of course, is the easier solution. That being said, it's just not clear to us when it is appropriate and not appropriate to say that some of these are not applicable. I think, for this one in particular, it is very, again, easy to understand what the intent of the requirement is, and that's why, we chose to list two potential outcomes here. I understand the comments you've made so far, and I'm just trying to elaborate a little bit more on our position.
And I guess even in the case that we provide additional information, I guess it's still, if we provide all of that additional information, even in that case, would we be conforming or would be not applicable? It's not totally clear to us, and perhaps it's immaterial if we provide that information. So, all right, step into the next one. Simulator capability. This one's pretty straightforward. We're expected to provide capability. We are developing that capability. Any questions there?
No questions on that. Something I will say about this particular requirement is that, and this is Jesse Seymour from the Human Factors and Operator Licensing Branch. This is a requirement that our Part 50 and 52 lessons learned rulemaking specifically, has called out as being something that's duplicative of the, requirements that you'd otherwise find in Part 55, specifically other items that are under 55, 59. So this is something that, just from an efficiency standpoint, we've self-identified that this is a duplicative requirement. So, again, I appreciate noting it here. If you go through and you meet the Part 55 stuff for a simulator, you should inherently be covering those. So just know that, longer term, that is something that we've sent to the commission as a proposal to, kind of correct this duplication that's here. So.
Okay, understood. The next one is about continuous improvement, establishing a program to ensure that we're continuing to improve our plant procedures. We have a continuous improvement program in place, so we conform with this one. All right, this is about control room design and human factor principles. We are incorporating human factor engineering principles into our design, so we conform here. Another item about control room design, it asks for a plant safety parameters display. We include those parameters on our VDUs. This one's talking about safety system indications. On our VDUs, we include the status of safety systems, so we conform here. Okay, this is about high point venting. So the requirement is to provide the capability of high point venting from the RCS. We do include high point vents that are used during refueling outages, but they are not safety related. The ADS system would be responsible for removing non-condensable gases in the event we had challenges to long-term cooling. Again, we intend to state that our design conforms with the requirement because we do have the capability to remove non-condensable gases from the RCS and to ensure continuous core cooling. But it is not the traditional high point vents that serve that purpose.
One question or comment on that, I guess, with some of the redesign that might be going on with the design, whether the ADS can remove non-condensable from every high point that might be in the system might still be a remaining question, at least from our perspective. And so I guess that would all remain to be seen whether it can serve that function. Obviously, the non-safety ones, or maybe that are for outage operation, they may not necessarily serve that purpose.
Yeah, John, that's a fair point, and maybe Clay, you can elaborate if I get anything wrong here. I think the main ingress of non-condensable gases that we see in our plant design is from the accumulators, again, that happen during our LOCA events. If we do avoid those accumulators with the ADS systems located in positions that it would still remove any of the non-condensable gases that would threaten our long-term cooling capabilities. So we don't see this changing from our previous design to this new upgraded design. So hopefully that answers your question. And I guess we're still not fully sure whether or not it's acceptable to say we conform with this requirement based off of I guess how our specific design is set up.
Yeah, I think it may just remain to be seen, or yeah. So I'll stop there. I can't really add anything more, but I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay. The next item is about radiation and shielding reviews. The intention here is the requirement here is to make sure that radiation from an accident doesn't prevent access to essential spaces or operation of essential equipment during an accident. Our design is set up to protect vital areas and to ensure that safety-related equipment will continue to operate, so we conform there. The next requirement is about post-accident sampling, the PASS system. Understand there's a bunch of history there, and that we intend to pursue an exemption. We recognize that one portion of the requirement is to sample hydrogen in the contaminant atmosphere, but that there are several other requirements in addition to this one that require sampling of hydrogen in the contaminant atmosphere in an accident scenario. So we're evaluating those separately. Okay. This next requirement, or a couple of requirements, are about hydrogen control systems. Our design includes passive autocatalytic recombiners to accommodate a 100% fuel-clad metal-water reaction. So we expect to be conform here. I guess, again, performing an evaluation of alternative hydrogen control systems, I'm not sure exactly how much detail is expected. I guess the staff, I know I didn't include this on in our questions ahead of time. Does staff have any specific thoughts on kind of what level of detail is appropriate for discussing that evaluation of alternatives? Obviously we have evaluated several methods, but I'm wondering how much detail is appropriate there.
And I'll add, this is Andrew Brenner, I'll add briefly, this is another one that when we looked at some of the compliance statements with other designs, it does simply just say, the design conforms with this requirement. It doesn't seem to have a whole lot of meat behind it. So it's something more than just saying, we've done the evaluation. It's something like that expected.
This is Shilp. I think to your question, similar to a previous comment, I would recommend going back to passive designs, which have included either PARs or hydrogen igniters, and the amount of information they have provided in the SAR, either FSAR or PSAR, mostly FSAR. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, just taking some notes here. All right. The next one's about relief and safety valve testing. There are kind of a variety of additional additional aspects to this requirement that I haven't listed on the slide. We conform to the majority of this requirement, except the aspects related to the power operated relief valves and at-risk conditions. In this case, we don't utilize power operated relief valves, as we mentioned earlier, and we are pursuing an exemption to some other requirements that require evaluation of at-risk conditions. So our intention here was to state conformance. Sorry about that. That was sounds like that's the emergency alert going out to everybody.
Yes, I just got the same thing myself.
All right. So again, if a member of the staff thinks that it would be more appropriate to include an exemption request here, because of the related exemption that we're pursuing, please speak up. Okay, hearing none. The next requirement is about safety valve position indication in the control room. We provide direct indication of these valves, so we conform there. The next one, again, is aux feed water. I think we've discussed this one a sufficient number of times now, so we can move on from this. So did you want to actually pursue that one, discuss that one in a little more detail? Okay. Okay, this next item is about pressurizer heaters and natural circulation. The requirements on the left there. So this one is still somewhat in flux as we're continuing to evaluate the results of our design, the recent design updates. We don't rely on pressurizer heaters to maintain natural circulation. In the event of a loss of offsite power, we have a couple of methods to accomplish decay heat removal. So this is another one where we're we could view this as conformance or exemption. We don't use the pressurizer heaters to maintain natural circulation, but in the event of a loss of offsite power, we have alternative systems that would be capable of ensuring we maintain natural circulation and decay removal.
This is John Lanning. I'll just make a quick comment. I mean, it might be difficult to say conforms, I guess, in the case that it doesn't necessarily have the emergency power, but maybe there's a way to, as you were just explaining, to argue that might be you might be in a satisfactory place without conforming literally.
Okay. So our next one is a series of requirements about containment isolation systems. I haven't listed them all here, but our design will meet all of those requirements, so we're conforming here. The next is about containment, purging, and venting. We do include a purge system and a vacuum relief system that meet the requirement. Okay, the next requirement's about instrumentation with control room readouts. So a variety of readouts that are required. We include containment instrumentation that meets the requirements. I note again here that we're still evaluating whether to include instruments for sampling hydrogen in the containment atmosphere, which would require an exemption here. If we do decide to exclude those, then we would pursue an exception. Sorry, about the wrong direction. Sorry, was there a comment there?
Can you say what the justification for that exemption, that particular exemption is? If you go that route.
I don't know that I want to kind of start expounding on that at this point. Okay. If we do pursue it, we would develop that justification and we provide it at that time.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
All right.
This is Shilp. So I had a question, not explicitly, about what you're doing here or what you plan to do here, but more about, I don't know what to call it, next steps for cases where you are performing evaluations and I'm not completely sure. Is this going to be it and then we see stuff in the PSAR, or would there be pre-application engagements once you have finalized where you land on different items where you're still doing evaluations and maybe you determine you need an exemption or not?
Yeah, Shilp, I can take that one. So I think anytime that we see us potentially going into exemption space or deviation from guidance space, we definitely intend to engage the staff on to make sure that we're one, the level of detail and the justification that we're providing, and two, if there are any concerns or questions from the staff, to try and get ahead of that before the application is submitted itself. Our goal is not to surprise the staff in any part of our application. There probably are a couple that if we go and finalize our analysis and maybe there are some small changes to wording in some of these that would need to be updated. But if it doesn't rise to the level of something that would truly surprise you guys, at least in our minds. But we're probably not intending to come and circle back with every change that would be presented from today.
Understood. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Any more questions on this one?
Just let me interrupt just for a second. This is Greg Cranston. Basically, the whole presentation is non-proprietary, and I don't know if we're going to need any of the closed session time, but the open session was scheduled to end at 2:30, but I don't think I think we can just move in and take the time of the closed session and not change over to a different web link or anything like that. So I just wanted to bring that up. If anybody, has any comments on that, let me know, or else we'll just keep proceeding with the existing presentation. Okay, let's go.
All right. Well, that sounds right to me. All right. The next one is instrumentation for indication of core cooling. We've got there's a requirement to ensure unambiguous indication of inadequate core cooling. We have a variety of ways to provide that indication, so we conform there. The next requirement is about providing instrumentation adequate for monitoring plant conditions following an accident that includes core damage. We adhere to the relevant guidance, and we conform on this one. So we're supposed to provide power supplies for pressurizer relief valves. There are a variety of subheaders there. We conform to this requirement again, with the exception of the aspects related to power operated relief valves. Our intention was to state conformance. Because our design doesn't use those valves, those types of valves. Okay. The next requirement states that we need to have several support buildings. Our design includes those buildings, so we conform. Okay. There's a requirement to include leakage control and detection for systems that would contain source term radioactive materials outside of containment following an accident. Our design is such that we do not circulate or have systems in which source term containing radioactive materials, materials containing source term radioactive materials exit the containment. And so this requirement is not applicable to us. This next one is about implant radiation monitoring. We include the required radiation monitoring, so we conform. This next one's about control room habitability, ensuring that we have habitability in the event of accidents where radioactivity and radiation may, be causing problems there. We've evaluated the potential impacts of that, and our control room is designed to preclude habitability issues. This next requirement is about incorporating lessons learned. Our design team continually incorporates operating design and construction experience from industry, so we conform there. Next is about quality assurance. In our quality assurance documents, we will demonstrate that we conform to these. This one is quite similar, right? More quality assurance requirements. Our quality assurance document is going to demonstrate that we conform to those. This one is about containment penetrations. So the requirement is to provide one or more containment penetrations in order not to preclude future installation of systems to prevent containment failure. We intend to pursue an exemption here. Our containment is designed to accommodate peak containment pressure for design basis events. But we were hoping to get a little clarity on the intent of this requirement. Our kind of general understanding is that it was intended to be applied to existing plants as a means to kind of future-proof them. So it's not totally clear to us how this ought to be applied to a new design, where we are seeking to, anticipate, provide appropriate penetrations for everything that we could need in the future.
So there is a hand raised, Anne-Marie Grady.
Yes. As far as providing one or more containment penetrations, I think you'll find if you look at AP 1000 that they complied with it without an exemption by having penetrations equivalent in size to a single 3-foot diameter, for your information.
So I guess with that,
and all I know about the intent is exactly what's in the language, and that's to prevent to preclude future installations. So the idea would be to use existing penetrations that have other purposes as well, but designate them as being able to be utilized if future installation was required.
Okay, so I guess I can't say that I personally know where every penetration is in our containment will end up being or is in the design right now. But I guess in a scenario where each of our containment penetrations was spoken for and was associated with a specific system, but the quantity and number of penetrations is such that it's greater than a 3-foot diameter. I guess would we meet the requirement because we have penetrations that are larger than a 3-foot diameter opening, or do we need to have a containment penetration that is not assigned to any other system? That is purely for some potential future system.
The second that you just described has not been provided by the new reactor applications, and we have accepted that several penetrations that already have a primary use would be suitable if taken together to be able to provide be equivalent to the 3-foot diameter. That's all I can say. That's the history of our review of this. I'm not defending it.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. The next item is about containment integrity. A variety of several requirements here. Our design ensures containment integrity during accidents, and that one of the other portions is about post-accident inerting system, but we do not include one of those. This next one is about external hydrogen recombiners. Our design doesn't include hydrogen recombiners outside of containment, so it's not applicable here. The next one is to provide a description of the management plan. We intend to provide a pointer to where that will be in the PSAR, so we'll conform here. And that's the extent of the ones that are kind of not either BWR or B&W specific. So I guess we've kind of had this discussion. oops, sorry. It looks like we've got a hand from Joseph.
Oh, well,
Go ahead.
I didn't want to. So, going back to slide 30, I don't know why I didn't raise my hand then. I think I missed it. But could you talk about this Class 1E DC power distribution system, or is it too early to discuss that? I mean, I guess I was under the consideration that your design doesn't require 1E power as we know it for existing reactors, but this Class 1E DC is something I don't think I've seen before for, say, SMR slant advanced reactors.
Is Pat, are you available? Is he on to answer that?
And maybe the discussion's not needed now. I just saw that and it just struck an interest in me. And probably electrical should have more interest than I do, but
I guess, do you want to speak to that, or should we follow up with once we talk to our electrical folks?
Yeah, I mean, I can at least give a high-level overview of how the system would work. But essentially, we have batteries that are considered Class 1E batteries that would go and provide power in the event of safety system actuation or a loss of all other power sources. And there's enough power in those batteries to go and have one-time valve actuations to get our plant aligned in the appropriate manner to go through a specific design basis event and maintain those states for supporting long-term cooling. I want to say I think that's similar to how the AP1000 is designed. I'm not positive on that front.
Well, I understand the battery concept. The fact that when you say it's considered Class 1E, I don't know. It's either Class 1E or it's not. But that's a discussion for later, I guess. It caught my eye, and that's why I just raised the question now.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as I know, and again, we can get a separate discussion, and we can get our electrical folks on to make sure we're not misleading you right now. But as far as I understand, anything that's related to safety that we need to ensure there is power during the design basis events are powered by a Class 1E system, that is the DC batteries.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you.
All right, so we'll walk through these. There are a couple of these where we have particular questions. I'll aim not to rehash too much of what we've discussed already. This first one's about high pressure coolant injection and reactor core isolation cooling systems that are applicable to BWRs only. That's not applicable to us. This one's about relief valve modifications, stated as applicable to BWRs only. So we're viewing this as not applicable. This one is about core spray and low pressure coolant injection. Again, listed as applicable to BWRs only. Long-term operation of some of the safety systems we discussed earlier that are BWR specific. Evaluating vessel integrity during rapid cool down. It's applicable to BWRs only. Actuation of so this one was interesting. It's applicable to B&W designs only. It's discussing establishing a design criterion for the allowable number of actuation cycles of the ECCS in the reactor protection system. We view this as not applicable. I guess for several of these, such as evaluating relief valve modifications, low pressure coolant injection, which could be viewed as like somewhat similar to our accumulators, vessel integrity during rapid cool downs, ECCS actuation. All of these are ones that like you could you could squint at and see us, potentially having the intent of that requirement be applicable to us. And so this kind of comes back to that same question of, for these ones where it states explicitly that it's applicable just to BWRs or B&W designs, should we be providing a discussion of, or is the staff expecting a discussion of the various ways that we looked at our relief valves to try and improve them, and to look at the allowable cycles on our on our safety systems?
I guess
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I know we've talked a lot about intent already today, that these ones are the ones in particular that I think we've really struggled to understand the intent here. We've gone through some of the new regs and other documentation to try and eke out what the intent is behind some of these, see, should we really be considering them potentially applicable? But we haven't really seemed to, find that documented anywhere. And we're still trying to go back and compare to what other applicants have done recently. And it does seem like that there's not a whole lot of specific discussion as to why these requirements are not applicable, other than just saying they are, B&W designs only, or applicable to B&W designs only.
And again, I don't know if there's other staff that are better able to answer this, and this might be one where staff wants to look at this one a little bit more and come to a more consensus answer. But I'll just tell you off the cuff, the idea that this is singled out for one design, even though other designs staff could potentially have asked that question of, but didn't. That does suggest that there might have been more of a focus on this one design for a reason. That's just some tentative feedback, but I think we would probably have to look at that a little more closely before we took a position.
Okay. Yeah, I recall looking at this particular one. I tried to go into several of the new regs and what wasn't really able to nail down exactly what where this one came from. So perhaps that's something that we can wait for a meeting summary to see kind of a more consensus opinion. Is that appropriate?
I think we could look at seeing what we could come up with by the time we have that meeting summary ready, at least. And if we can say more by that time, then I think we would definitely try to include that.
Yeah, this is Greg Graston. We can, as John said, also, depending on what's going on, then we can decide if we need to schedule a future meeting when we know we have the feedback that you're looking for.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, I guess you've heard kind of our thoughts on that. I think if we are going to be, pursuing, providing additional information to meet the intent of some of these requirements, we'll certainly be, reaching out and looking for your help on kind of understanding precisely where some of these come from. So we'll look forward to having that engagement if it's deemed necessary. So I think that takes us pretty much through to the end. The last few here are kind of in the same vein, either applicable just to BWRs or B&W. Again, we think that in many cases, if necessary, we could go through and provide a kind of a little bit more explanation of why we might not be, it might not be applicable to us, but we will wait for the meeting summary to get a kind of a better idea of what y'all think on that. I guess, does anyone have any questions on these last few or any general comments to make?
This is John Lenning. I just wanted to comment on the item that was on page 51. And the comment just was whether I might want to look into that one a little bit more too, to try to make sure I understand whether some of the other plant designs may have already voluntarily incorporated some of that into their logic, and that might have been the reason why this might have been singled out to this design. I don't know if you guys are aware of that one or not, but unlike the other one we just talked about, but because I know that this type of a trip is sometimes incorporated into other plants' design as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're evaluating this part of for our reactor protection system.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah,
fair enough. Yeah.
I don't recall this one specifically, but I imagine that I would have looked at it when I was looking at a variety of these other requirements, and I don't recall seeing anything really specific about why this was specific to B&W plants. But okay, any other last questions or comments?
I'm not sure if I missed it, but can you go to page 19?
Sure.
Didn't think I missed this, but so this one talks about sampling the reactor coolant system. Do I understand this correctly, that there's no capability to sample the reactor coolant system?
There is capability to sample the coolant system. I believe that the difference here would be that it would not necessarily be available in the event of a severe accident.
So I can provide maybe a little bit more context. I think what we're saying here is we do have the capability to sample during normal operations, and the nuance here might be that we think there are other effective means of assessing core damage in our plant design other than just taking reactor coolant samples that might be
So when I read this, the justification makes sense, and I can see you're evaluating instrumentation for doing these things, right? But if the instrumentation becomes your primary means of making these determinations, like reactivity determinations, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not meeting the requirement, right? Because the requirement is just that you have the capability to sample. So you can still use instrumentation as a primary means of taking these measurements, right? For hydrogen, for example, without really needing to take an exemption, because you would still be retaining the capability to draw the samples.
So there is kind of the second half of this talks about radiation exposure to individuals when you're taking these samples, and I think that may be the place where we can't prove that we would meet it.
Okay.
I don't know if we'd be able to show that we're keeping doses to those individuals taking the samples as low as the requirement asks for. But this requirement in particular was the subject of several papers, I think, from the GE owners groups. There was some owners group that had several back and forths with the NRC on this, and the eventual conclusion, as I recall, was that the NRC agreed that a post-accident sampling system was not the best way to make decisions after.
I recall those discussions back in the 90s as well. Yes, that's correct. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, very good.
Okay, one last call related to the presentation from either NRC or Holtec. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Is there a member of the public who would like to introduce themselves or make a comment or ask a question? Okay. Hearing none. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in the meeting. I thought there was a good interchange, and we have some areas to follow up on to gain more information and provide feedback. So we'll be following up on those. And in conjunction with the meeting summary, I'll be putting that together along with Carolyn, and we'll be circling that around to make sure we get the input from the technical branches in conjunction with what we want to identify in there. And as usual, we will be sending out a draft version of that summary for a prop check and a fact check before we actually issue it. I don't think there's any need to have any closed discussions since the whole presentation was public. So I think with that, yeah. So I think with that, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Craig. I was going to agree. I guess before we do close, I maybe want to follow up with Joe Ashcraft real quick. Is there a specific concern that I can relay regarding the Class 1E for the DC power system? Just so I can make sure we're getting.
Well, I mean, so I'm just going on memory from Chapter 8 stuff, but from NuScale on forward, they're using very reliable batteries and not necessarily 1E as we know of it in the existing designs due to their size, etc. So that's why I was asking.
Okay, understand. All right, that helps. Thanks.
Okay.
Great. Well, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Greg.
No, go ahead, Clark.
I was just going to say, as always, we appreciate the interchange. Looking forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you. Carolyn, any last minute comments?
None for me, Greg. Thanks.
All right. Well, with that, again, thank you all for participating, and the meeting is adjourned.